The prologue. Shadow Moses Island. XX, XX North, XX, XX West. Even the local fishermen rarely venture to this outcropping of land. Yet the incident of all incidents took place here on the remote isle north of Alaska's Fox Islands. A number of confirmed facts undermine the U.S. government's denial of the entire affair. Among those are the sudden appearance of the Ohio-class nuclear submarine USS Discovery off Shadow Moses, far away from its designated position, and an official record that shows that a squadron of 6 fully armed F-117 Nighthawks departed from Galena Air Force Base for Alaska a scant 16 hours later. In another possibly related event, an E-3C AWACS on emergency deployment to the Alaska area is said to have had none other than the then National Security Advisor Jim Hausman as its onboard VIP. What exactly happened on Shadow Moses? There was no lack of rumors to account for. This series of unusual military activities, an armed incursion, a coup attempt by a branch of the military, and other theories made its way to the public table. I can state unequivocally that none of them came close to the truth. What actually took place was the single greatest terrorist incident in modern history. It was an act of political violence on a scale the world had never seen. A blow that threatened to send the Damocles sword of nuclear warfare into free fall. Most significant of all, the attack stemmed from several so-called black projects, which the U.S. government had been conducting in top secret, away from public scrutiny. I have in my hand 2 optical discs. One contains the entire record of events that took place on Shadow Moses Island that fateful day, the takeover of a nuclear weapons disposal plant by an armed group. Other key points of this incredible record are the identification of the perpetrators as the government's own genetically enhanced next-generation commandos and a covert Special Forces squad Foxhound with a long dark history of secret intervention. The existence of one Metal Gear Rex, a bipedal nuclear-capable tank whose development was one of the most classified projects of all time, the discovery of a massive government conspiracy, the activities of a former Foxhound operative who single-handedly took on this daunting situation and averted the crisis, a man who is only known by his code name, Solid Snake. Let me get a quick drink of water. The other remaining disc holds the details of Project Foxdie, a massive cover-up which the U.S. government planned and executed in order to prevent exposure. There are, after all, forces within the U.S. government who seek to maintain the military power structure established in the last century, and will not hesitate to reuscinate the terror of nuclear arms in order to achieve that end. My intent is to expose their activity and the entirety of the Shadow Moses affair. Through this book, only then we can hope to free the coming generations and the Demnosa Herodetus of the 20th century nuclear arms race. I looked up from the mass of documents at the sound of the doorbell. On the monitor in front of me was a half-finished status report on the resurgence of nuclear arms development in a certain Middle Eastern state. The UNSCOM, the United Nations Special Commission, had officially requested a survey by the UN weapons inspectors and had been refused entry. Tensions were once again running high in the Gulf. As a military analyst whose specialty was nuclear arms, I was under contract from a think tank to produce a study of the situation. It was due the day after the next, and interruptions were definitely not welcome. I grounded out my cigarette in the ashtray and stepped out of the study. All visitors to my house are checked via a surveillance camera and then let through the heavy gate. The property itself is surrounded by a high wall. It may seem like overkill for a beach community, but security is a necessity in greater Los Angeles, if only to keep out the legion of swim-slad clan tourists. However, there was nobody to be seen at the gate. It was either a prank or the camera was malfunctioning. Reluctant to investigate, but feeling unsettled nonetheless, I headed back to the study and sat back down at the computer to continue my work. Just then someone spoke behind me. "You always were a little careless." I spun around, kicking my chair over. There was a man standing at the entrance of the study, slouching in a well-tailored suit. "Richard!" He caught my eye and grinned. Ignoring my surprise, he strolled into the room, gazing around at the pile of books and papers, and still as disorganized as ever. He shrugged his shoulders in a familiar gesture, triggering a wave of memories laced with bitterness. Richard Ames and I were married. "Oh, really?" "That I didn't know." Once upon a time, so they're divorced. We were both young and working for the DIA, Defense Intelligence Agency. We spent much of our brief marriage in disagreement over virtually every issue. And just as I came to realize that our union was a mistake, he disappeared from my life. A while later, I received the paperwork for a divorce from his lawyer. There was a generous alimony offered involved, which I refused. Not only did I find the thought of owing him anything intolerable, I also wanted to prove that he was not the only one who could walk away without an explanation. The divorce was finalized without us ever meeting face to face, and we were legally strangers once again. And then 5 years since, I quit the DIA and become a freelance analyst. I had not seen Richard at all, nor even heard of his whereabouts. "How did you get in here?" I demand. After all, attempting to scale the wall or force the front door would immediately trigger the security system, but he refused to be ruffled. "If you're going to use a flimsy lock like that, may as well not bothered. I recommend a more professional security setup." "Does the term breaking and entering mean anything to you, Richard?" "You know law isn't my field of expertise," he replied nimbly, and peered over my shoulder at the report on the computer display. "Radioisotope projectile separator, uranium-235 production feasibility for high-speed gas centrifuge. This must be about that Middle East nuke development. Looks like your career is going well. That's great." I pushed Richard aside and asked him flatly, "What do you want?" He took a step back and regarded me with a slightly mischievous smile. "What, you afraid I came back to give us another chance?" He let the silence linger as if to relish my reaction. Then suddenly, formal, he continued, "It's an official request from the DIA." He placed a folder on the desk. "I'm asking for your cooperation as a member of NEST. NEST stands for Nuclear Emergency Search Team, a group that operates on the Department of Energy budget. It was established in 1974 to provide technological support to the FBI in areas of intelligence, investigation, site securement, damage containment, and medical response during incidents involving criminal threats of nuclear weapon use. Call it a band of experts on nuclear terrorism, if you will. NEST consists of independently contracted scientists from federally funded research entities like Los Alamos and Lawrence Livermore, and military specialists from groups dealing with nuclear arms issues. I happen to be of the latter group." Richard was opening the file folder. "You've heard of Shadow Moses Island, I assume?" I nodded assent. I had indeed heard of the remote place, north of Alaska's Fox Islands, though it was hardly public knowledge. The island was home to a nuclear weapons disposal facility. According to the terms of START II, Strategic Arms Reduction Treaty, the total number of tactical nuclear warheads owned by the U.S. and Russia were reduced to somewhere between 3,000 and 3,500 in the later decades of the 20th century. The outcome was a massive number of warheads in need of disposal when there was already a shortage of storage space for radioactive materials. As a result, warheads had to be kept somewhere before they could be dismantled and their radioactive elements extracted for long-term storage. The Shadow Moses facility was the answer. It was the crystallization of the forces of nuclear proliferation, a political engineering that gives preference to delaying a solution rather than producing one, and a hidden military agenda to preserve what could of the old nuclear stockpile. Richard took out several photographs from the folder and handed them to me. They all appeared to be satellite captures of the nuclear weapons disposal plant on Shadow Moses Island, perhaps acquired from the NRO, National Reconnaissance Office. There were multiple human figures around the building structures. Richard broke all the silence. The disposal plant was seized by terrorists. I looked up sharply at the news, but his next words left me speechless. And the ringleaders are Foxhound members. An irregular team of the best commandos that the military has to offer, armed with cutting-edge technology. That was Foxhound, the best of the best, and completely unknown to the public they ostensibly serve. Their function was to intervene in the kind of low-intensity conflicts the U.S. could not officially touch. They were the shadow soldiers of numerous regional conflicts and civil wars, shaping history with sabotage, selective assassination, and other covert acts of war. Richard had more to say. It's not just Foxhound that's involved in this. Foxhound was conducting joint exercises with the Next Generation Special Forces, and they're a part of the takeover as well. The Next Generation Special Forces is an aggressive anti-terrorism squad deployed to counter acts of political violence involving weapons of mass destruction, such as nuclear, biological, and chemical warfare methods. The combat philosophy is derived from the one used for Force 21, and most of the recruits came from a mercenary background. The men are intensively trained in VR environment, and their combat capability is estimated to be well beyond even those of Delta Force or the Night Stalkers. While the government categorically denies the accusation, there are persistent rumors that the men have been genetically enhanced to increase tactical advantage. Foxhound and the Next Generation Special Forces, they were without a doubt the most skilled group of fighting men produced by the U.S., and they had hijacked a nuclear arsenal. Richard had more bad news. There are also civilian hostages involved. Two of them happen to be the DARPA chief, Donald Anderson, and Kenneth Baker, the president of Arms Tech. The Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency is the research satellite of the U.S. Defense Department, charged with planning and leading the development of new weapons technology. Arms Tech happens to be one of the top 3 defense contractors in the country. There's no such thing as a coincidence, especially the kind that involves the head of these two organizations meeting in an out-of-the-way nuclear weapons disposal plant. I decided to be direct with Richard. There was something going on in that disposal facility, I take it. Let me guess, a demonstration of a new weapon? How should I know? Shadow Moses is also a prime Northern Lights observation locale, you know. Whatever Richard knew, he wasn't telling, but his evasiveness only confirmed my suspicions. Whatever was going on, this was no ordinary terrorist incident. With that in mind, I moved on to another point. What are their demands? They want a body. Not just any corpse, though. They want Foxhound's founder, Big Boss. Legendary soldier, best fighting man of the 20th century. The whole works. His body? Why would they want something like that so badly? No idea, but unless they have it within 24 hours, they will launch a nuclear strike. Richard glanced at the watch coolly. So we have about 19 hours. You don't seem too worried. The DoD is already working on the situation. Just as I'd suspected, Richard always has a plan in place and the machinery in motion before opening up to someone else. All he asks from others is approval after the fact. Shadow Moses is completely locked down. We had to rule out deploying an entire assault team. Instead, we're inserting a single operative to free the hostages and prevent the nuclear strike. Impossible. Possible for Solid Snake. Solid Snake, the former Foxhound, a legend among mercenaries for single-handedly bringing down the fortress cities of Outer Heaven and Zanzibar land. Yes, with Solid Snake in the picture, there was a possibility of success. But still, USS Discovery, an Ohio-class nuclear submarine, is already in place with Snake aboard. So the plan was already a go. I looked Richard in the eye and held his gaze. And what do I have to do with all this? He grinned. Snake may be a legend, but he knows jack about nuclear weapons, which is why I'm asking you to be part of the mission support. We'll have you set up in no time. Right on cue, 2 men started to move a large piece of hardware, apparently communication equipment, onto the study. Richard nodded towards the bulky load. I'd like you to be available to Snake for constellation via satellite link up. As soon as the equipment was in place, an engineer typed start to make adjustments. I could see another group of men setting up a satellite dish in the backyard. They were all in civilian clothes, but not a few of them had the build and the oddly fitting jacket that marked them as armed military personnel. Clearly, refusal was not an option. But there was still something that puzzled me. Nest has a small investigative team, SRT, on standby at all times for immediate response. They were stationed at Nellis AFB in Las Vegas, just over Nevada. Clearly, they were the natural choice for this assignment, and if not the SRT, the DIA also had a number of qualified nuclear weapons specialists. Richard had started to direct his men on where to set up the equipment, but I interrupted him. Why me? He turned and answered without missing a beat. I need people I can trust. There's too much at stake. It was a lie. The Richard Ames I knew trusted no one, but it was clear that whatever the reason, he did not intend to tell me. It's a good thing I was in. What would you have done if I weren't? You'd have to be somewhere. We would have located you. I'm sure you would have. So are you in? I took a deep breath. Of course. I don't enjoy being a pawn, especially Richard's, but I had no intention of standing by while nuclear terrorism was in progress. A nuclear strike takes an untold number of lives, all in the blink of an eye. Adults and infants, women and men, it kills indiscriminately. If there was a chance that I could do something to stay the hand on the nuclear button, I had to do it. So, everything is set. Richard slapped a fist into the other palm. Insertion was a success. Snake is on Shadow Moses. Richard walked into the study with the update he just received from one of his men. The study was almost unrecognizable, thanks in part of the racks of communication hardware. Cables snaked across every square inch of available space, and engineers and DIA agents were coming in and going in controlled chaos. The place looked like what it now was, a temporary mission control room. Richard laid a hand on my shoulder. You should be hearing from him soon. You're clear on how to use the radio? I nodded assent. While the engineers were busy setting up the equipment, I had been briefed on its use as well as the mission. Snake had been delivered to the general area of Shadow Moses Island by USS Discovery, an Ohio-class nuclear submarine. He was then ejected from the submarine on a swimmer delivery vehicle, SDV, which he would abandon once within the range of underwater listening devices located near the disposal plant. He would swim the rest of the way in the freezing cold Bering Sea water. This last leg of the insertion struck me as nothing short of suicidal, until I learned that Snake was outfitted with a state-of-the-art sneaking suit and had been injected with a compound designed to prevent onset of hypothermia. In addition, while Snake would be the only field operative involved, he would be in radio contact with a support team during much of the mission. The members of this support team drew from a wide range of backgrounds. The mission control officer was Colonel Roy Campbell, who would remain on board the USS Discovery. I knew him by reputation alone. He was a former Foxhound commander and Solid Snake's CO during the quelling of the 1999 Zanzibar land uprising. He had retired soon after, but from the looks of things, he had been called out of retirement for this mission. Dr. Naomi Hunter, a genetic engineering expert on a temporary assignment from the Gentech against ATGC, was also on the team. She had apparently been leading the bioengineering program for Foxhound. Richard matter-of-factly confirmed that both Foxhound and the Next Generation Special Forces had been undergoing genetic manipulation to enhance their combat capability. I have a difficult time grasping what we have come to, modifying a person's essential genetic structure for the sake of creating a better soldier. Also aboard the Discovery was Mei Ling, the inventor of the new radar and communication system deployed for this mission. She was something of an engineering wunderkind, an MIT student who managed to turn the current protocol of secure communication completely on its head. The last of the support team was McDonald Miller, a former survival instructor for Foxhound. Unlike the rest of us, he had volunteered his services upon receiving news of the incident on Shadow Moses. Like myself, he was working via satellite link-up from his home in Alaska. The five of us were more than equipped to support Snake from our respective areas of expertise, but Snake was still the lone field operative, and the mission was a desperate one. Despite that, Richard maintained that this was the most workable plan produced by the DoD situational analysis. In hindsight, perhaps I should have suspected something then. The signs of a conspiracy were there, cleverly disguised as it was in a seemingly reckless mission plan. But we failed to see it, and both Solid Snake and I were to regret our folly bitterly. "It's time, Nastasha," Richard called out as the call signal came on. The line was already live as I nodded to him and took my position. I can feel myself growing keener, more on edge. "This is Nastasha Romanenko. Good to meet you, Solid Snake. You the nuke expert that the Colonel was talking about?" The voice that responded over the radio was above all things calm. Here was a man operating alone out on a deeply hostile territory, and I could sense nothing resembling tension or impatience in his tone. Instead, it was as level and unruffled as someone answering a routine telephone call at their office desk. Impressed, I continued on. "Correct. If you have any questions about nuclear technology, all you need to do is ask. My department is military analysis, so I should be able to provide support with weapons information as well. I was called into this mission as a nuclear emergency search team, NEST, consultant, and I'd like to emphasize that my cooperation was freely given. I have no intention of allowing any nuclear strikes on my watch, let alone the rogue kind. Let me work with you on this one. You get to the point fast, don't you? There's a missile that's about to fly. A nuclear strike can never be someone else's problem, and I'm not good at standing around twiddling my thumbs. Not that I can do little more than advise in the case." The fact that was all too obvious. Snake was the one who was putting his life on the line in Alaska. and I was safe and sound in California. All I can do was talk over the radio. Snake's voice became less abrupt. It may not seem like much, but it's enough. No one's asking you to come out here and fight. That's my job. Anyway, Nastasha, I'll be counting on your help. It was a strangely comforting voice, a voice that inspired trust. Same here, as I answered. I resolved to myself to do everything in my power to help him complete this mission. The nuclear weapons disposal plant on Shadow Moses dates back to 2002. It was built solely for the purpose of temporarily storing nuclear warheads slated for disposal. I started to brief Snake on the background of the disposal facility, running through the points he needed to know. My first short exchange with Snake ever, I was beginning to understand why he was called the man who makes the impossible possible. The icy calm in the face of insurmountable difficulty, the absolute confidence made it suddenly seem possible that he would pull off this deadly mission. He had the power to make me believe. I grew conscious of Richard's gaze. What? Oh, just that you have a kind of glow about you when you're working. I like it. A glow? Funny, you used to call it workaholism in the past. You found it very unappealing, I recall. Time flies. People change their minds. It's called nostalgia. You'll dislike it again soon enough. Perhaps. Richard continued to look at me. Solid Snake certainly managed to live up to his reputation. He adroitly wove his way through the enemy's patrols and infiltrated the nuclear weapons disposal plant, where he made contact with Donald Anderson, the DARPA director. Throughout the mission, we had radio monitoring capability over Snake's every movement thanks to his internal nanomachines. It was through this access channel that I learned a shocking fact. Donald Anderson, discovered in solitary confinement by Solid Snake, confirmed that the terrorist had full nuclear capability, and that Shadow Moses Island was the site of a field exercise for Metal Gear. Metal Gear. The very mention of that name sent me reeling. It was the ultimate weapon, a nuclear-capable bipedal tank that could launch a rapid and accurate nuclear strike from virtually any terrain, from mountains to marshlands to the desert dunes. It could bestow the dubious privilege of initiating a missile strike from sites that were previously out of the question as launch locations. For that very reason, analysts had long predicted that if brought to fruition, Metal Gear technology would rewrite the tactical map of the world. There are speculations that this unholy grail of weapons development was being pursued late last century in the South African fortress made of outer heaven, then in the ultra-nationalist sovereignty of Zanzibar land in Central Asia. One source went so far as to claim that a working prototype had been produced, but the weapon never made it onto the world military stage. Instead, it was destroyed by a special forces operative. The squad in question was Foxhound, and the operative was a man codenamed Solid Snake. I briefly wondered if it were some strange quirk of fate that had brought Snake into this latest incident, but I knew Richard too well. Snake had to have been called in because of his past battles. Whoever had planned this mission had been thorough, and the more I realized the fact, the less I liked it. "Get me another swig of water,"